All right. So, welcome. I'm Johan Matthews. I'm part of the learning team here at the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast. A little bit about the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast. I'm sure many of you have heard it on this next slide. We're a nonprofit community development financial institution founded in 1975. So, a little over 50 years in the game. People know us for providing co-op-friendly financial products, usually loans, and we also serve as an investment opportunity for socially conscious investors. And this program is being put on by the learning team, our technical assistance program. There are four of us, and three of us are on the call. Carolyn is going to be taking the lead today. She's a program director, discussing managing your co-op. My role is ecosystem strategy manager, and we've got Maggie, Myron on the team on the presentation as well. So, oh, and Carla just joined. So we've got the full whole house. So you guys are in for a treat. We're here to support you guys. If you ever need help developing your co-op, no matter what stage you're in, you can reach out to us at coopfund.coop/coaching. We'd be happy to help. We've helped hundreds of co-op curious entrepreneurs over the years. So as I said before, this is session 2 in our 3-part mini course series, Design Your Co-op, Manage Your Co-op, Govern Your Co-op. It's designed for the co-op curious, folks who are just getting started, but experienced cooperators can learn from these sessions as well. Lots of great strategies and frameworks. As part of this course, we have a weekly voluntary office hour. So Wednesdays, 12 to 1 p.m. EST, right, Eastern. You can hit this Google Meet link, or you're probably already invited. If it's on your calendar, that's what it is. Maybe if being curious, you should show up. You might just get the hour for just you if you're lucky. But usually we have 2 or 3 people who can talk about any questions that they have with the content, or even what's going on in their own personal regions, lives, cooperative journeys, and we get to learn from each other. So it's optional, and it happens every Wednesday until the end of the course in June. And if you already have a project and you'd love to get started with some deeper coaching, that's what our co-op coach is for. We've got the link right here. You can also go to our website, coopfund.coop/coaching. And if you're ever looking for any connections, you can reach out to us. So today I'm going to turn it over to Carolyn to kind of walk us through what we're going to do today, and it should be pretty interactive and fun. Ready, Carolyn?
I am. Hey folks, good to see everybody. I'm Carolyn Edsel-Vetter. I'm also part of the learning team with Johan, Maggie, and Carla. And today we're going to be talking about co-op management. And just to give you a little background on myself, I came to CFNE originally actually as a borrower, so I worked for a yard and a half landscaping. We formed a worker co-op in 2014 and bought out our boss when she retired. And I was co-CEO there for another 5 years before coming over to CFNE to do technical assistance. So this is a subject near and dear to my heart because as a co-op conversion, we had to kind of figure out what does it mean to do shared management, to go from having one boss who had all the ideas in her head to teasing out what's governance, what's for the board, what's big picture, and what's day-to-day management and operations, and to be really clear about how we could share that and make it benefit everybody. So I hope that y'all will be as enthusiastic about co-op management as I am by the end of this session. So we'll be talking about role of management in the co-op because a lot of people feel like, management, co-op, that doesn't fit, but hopefully I will convince you that it does. And we'll talk about some specific structures that help with co-op management. And then we'll have a little choose your own adventure section where we can either talk about communicating about money with pictures or sort of financial statement storytelling, or the 4 pillars of co-op management. So be thinking about which of those sounds more exciting to you, and we will vote when we get there. By the end of today, here's sort of some learning objectives. Most importantly, I think I'm hoping everyone can walk away with some clarity about what's management, what's governance, and how do they interact, because it's the one place where I see from very small to very big co-ops get tripped up. And the more clarity we have, the smoother everything goes for everybody, and everybody can, really live into their roles in the co-op. Just to recap, so in last month's webinar, which you can find on our YouTube, Johan shared about the co-op design canvas and talked about how co-ops, whether they're worker, producer, consumer, are really about members coming together to meet shared needs by pooling skills, resources, ideas to create a successful enterprise. And whether that business is a worker-owned business, it's a shared system for marketing or selling products, or it's like resident-owned housing, in any of those scenarios, co-op members have to figure out how to manage those shared resources effectively to make sure the co-op succeeds over the long term. So that's where the management piece comes in. Regardless of your structure, there is some element of, we brought all these resources to the table, how are we going to make sure we're making the best use of them? Okay, so you might be wondering what management looks like in a co-op. And also, like, we live in this world, we work for places, we have bosses, we live under capitalism, so you probably have some ideas about what management means already. So take a minute to just think about what thoughts, feelings, words come up for you when you think about working for a manager or being a manager, and drop those into the chat. Don't push send until I say, and we'll do a countdown and we'll drop all our answers in there at once and sort of have a little waterfall of ideas. So again, in the chat, what feelings, words come up when you think about working for a manager or being a manager? And Maggie or Carla can ask one of y'all to do the chat reading in just a second. Okay. All right. 3, 2, 1, boom.
We have pressure as a manager responsibility, power dynamic, fear-based leadership, and being a manager work with are the options right now.
Yeah, so not, not overwhelmingly positive. Responsibility, yeah, it's like it's positive and also it's heavy. And some of the other ones fear-based, like, yeah. So all that stuff is there. And at the same time, management doesn't have to be a dirty word. It doesn't have to mean exercise of power over. One definition of management that we like to use is it's about organizing resources to achieve goals and objectives in the most efficient and effective manner. So that's neutral. Like that's really acting in service to the co-op by making sure that all the resources and energy and ideas that members are putting in are stewarded in the best way possible so that the co-op can achieve its purpose. So I'm going to invite you to all take a breath. And let's gather up any head trash or trauma we might have about management and put it in the compost bin to fertilize some better leadership. So today when we're talking about management, we're not talking about all that yucky stuff. We're really talking about management functions, about how we steward co-op resources. We're not necessarily talking about like managers with a capital M, like a boss or a CEO. Okay, and so let's talk a little bit about co-op management structure, since we're not just talking about bosses here. Some co-ops do have 1 or 2 people at the head. They might have a general manager or CEO, and particularly in larger co-ops that might benefit from having some role differentiation and some more centralized management, we might see that. A lot of co-ops have leadership teams, and if we think about small co-ops, sometimes that's the default. If you have 5 people, you might all manage collectively. And even there, it's still usually necessary to have some differentiation and some delegation to There might be work groups, there might be, somebody who does the finances or somebody who does the ordering, just to keep things efficient. And then another common structure we see is sociocracy or circles, where members sort of organize into semi-autonomous circles that have overlap and have representation across circles so that people can self-manage. Those who are closest to the work have the most control over it. But you still have that general circle to ensure that there's coordination and communication. And in a co-op, also, managers aren't completely autonomous. They're chosen by and responsible to the board, and we'll talk a little bit more about that structure in a minute. And also, management roles don't necessarily have to mean specific people. So those roles can be rotating. They can be based on people's skill set. They can be assigned. There are lots of different ways to organize how that management team is put together. So I want to invite everybody to, Maggie, do we have breakout capacity on this line?
Yes.
Okay. Do you mind making maybe just 2 breakout groups?
Mm-hmm.
Thank
And
you.
is it okay for them to be random?
They can be random.
Great.
Hopefully all staff don't end up in one. So what we're going to do is take about 5 minutes to just talk about these 3 structures and think about what might be good about them, what might be challenging about them, and take some notes. And then when we come back, we'll do a little brainstorming of pros and cons of centralized management, a leadership team, or sociocracy.
Great.
Cool.
And I'll hang back if anybody needs things. I have no idea how they're still there in their room. I think they got stuck. Okay,
I was gonna go back in there and see if I can.
there we go.
There we go. Okay. So, anybody want to share back out? What sort of things came up in your groups?
Should I not share actually?
Yes, you were sharing. Thank you.
Okay.
Um, so do you want to, the other group that's already got stuff in here, you want to walk us through what's here and then folks from our group can share back too?
Yeah. So my group was Free, Zachary, Kara, and Carla. Invite you guys to share any that you really want the crew to know.
Can somebody say more about people-centered and outcome-based for sociocratic circles?
Yeah, Free. Would you mind sharing a bit more on that?
Sure. Um, so when I talked about that, I was thinking about how we practice sociocracy, and another group is thinking about the people's needs that we're serving and creating circles that support those needs. And in the sociocratic process, how we practice the circles, um, outcomes, it's an outcome based practice. So at the end of each meeting, there's outcomes. At the end of each goal, when we reconvene at what we call our convenings, we see those outcomes, we practice those outcomes. So it's a consistent goal that we achieve in that. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Anything else from Johan's group that anybody wants to highlight or has questions about? Somebody from my group want to share a couple of our things?
Yeah, we were really talking about like speed and innovation and how that kind of can show up here. I think how we were talking about it is like that would probably lend itself more to the leadership team or general manager, CEO type direction. If you have like, I think, what was his name? Was it David? He had a good way of breaking down like different types of decisions that need to be made or like type of culture. Um, and yeah, sometimes you may have to have decisions that are not popular if you're like leaning towards innovation. So we were just like kind of just having discussion around like how can that work in co-ops and are there successful models of it? And it seems like they probably lean themselves more to the two on the left, but I think our discussion was really just more like open-ended and just curious about like how that looks and where it's successful in co-ops.
Yeah, thanks. Anybody else from our group want to jump in? Great, cool.
David came off mute for a second there.
Yeah, David.
I did. I came off mute just to say that I think Akil kind of nailed it. So just just a +1.
Sweet. Yeah, Johan, you want me to take back the share?
Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead. You can just do
Oh,
it
I
actually.
can replace current share. Look at
Yeah,
that.
these are the new tools in Zoom.
Yeah, so some of these probably parallel things that already got discussed. Just to play it out a little bit more, folks already sort of pointed to smaller leadership group makes decisions faster. Potentially, there might be more innovation. There's also accountability is easier when you have specific people. I think in sociocracy, it can be a little circular, and that central circle really has to be able to hold a lot on accountability. The flip side is the more people you have involved and the more transparency, the less likelihood there is of abuses of power, because there's more sort of power sharing and transparency. One thing, having come through a conversion experience, is I think often having centralized leadership can feel more supportive to a group that maybe doesn't have as much experience with leadership or management. And then sometimes the goal might be, like, over time to develop more leaders within the organization. But, often I think if you're bringing a business from having one boss to having many co-owners sharing both ownership and leadership, it can take a minute to get there. Let's see. Leadership teams, one thing that's really cool about them is they can be a way to do that leadership development, especially if you have rotating structures around facilitation and particular roles. So they can be a nice, like, holding the middle space between those. Yeah, y'all can read, but that's some key things I wanted to pull out. And then also information, like information sharing, both sort of up and down. The more centralized your leadership is, the more they need to have really good mechanisms for how do we get feedback? How do we get input? How do we innovate with everybody's voices at the table, even if it's on us to make the quick decision? So again, none of these is like the right way to do it, but just really wanted to highlight that co-ops can arrange themselves in lots of different ways, and also over time might decide for different structures for different reasons based on kind of like their phase of development. So whichever management structure a co-op chooses, one thing that remains the same throughout is that management's not the top of a hierarchy. It's part of a circle of delegation and accountability. So co-op members elect the board, and they hold the board responsible, and they can run for the board. So there's built-in representation there. The board sets big picture decision making and selects management, or affirms management and holds them accountable. And then management implements the board policies and is making sure day-to-day operations run smoothly, which often means that they're supervising the worker owners. So there's a really cyclical thing, and it can be hard to get right. And it really rests on being clear on what hats we're all wearing at any given time. And, in the context of this series, where we're really talking about starting a co-op and making sure you have a good foundation, I feel like this idea of multiple hats is really important, because what I see a lot in small co-ops is it's like, well, we all do everything, and so we can have conversations about anything at any time. And what happens there is, like, it can be really hard to have a good focused conversation in the middle of the workday about something that really should be a board level decision. And so even if there are 5 of you and you're serving all of those roles, I really recommend that you start creating some distinction. So like when I was working at a yard and a half, I was so busy working in the business all the time, even though I had this manager role, that it was hard for me to think about that bigger picture stuff, because I'm thinking about, like, why are we throwing away so much metal edging, and I really had to step back, and we had a weekly management meeting, and that was helpful for all of us who were in that role also, as well as being worker owners, to say, okay, what management level decisions do we need to make? What sort of operational decisions do we need to make? So that might be like work schedules, or looking at sales numbers, or upcoming jobs. And then we also had a separate monthly board meeting where we were focused on governance. And so, holding management accountable, looking at financial results, talking about what investments we might have coming down the road, thinking about, policy decisions that might benefit the worker owners. So Johan shared this cooperatively ever after sort of timeline. Actual mileage may vary, obviously, but timeline of the phases that co-ops go through. And one takeaway for today is that really management has a place at each of these phases. So, early on, it might be making sure somebody takes meeting notes and puts them in a shared folder that everybody has access to. It might be surveying members about their skills and making a list of like, what work do we need to do to set up the co-op? Later on, it might be, tracking money and labor contributed, figuring out a way to share financial information with all of your members so that they can help with strategic planning, or coming up with a system to educate prospective members and get them ready to join the co-op. So, throughout your life cycle, there are management tasks that are being done, and it's important to kind of think about who's going to fill those roles and what are they. So I'm going to take a pause now for any questions, and then also be thinking about this choose your own adventure question. So we can go in two directions. We can go communicating about money with pictures, so sort of financial statement storytelling, or 4 pillars of co-op management. So a little more of a deep dive into what are the roles of management and what tasks do they actually do in a co-op. But while you're thinking about where you want to go, any questions? And I cannot see everybody, so feel free to come off mute and yell out if you have any, or pop it in the chat. Okay, I've either been very clear or I've been very opaque. That's what that tells me. And if I've been very opaque, please just stop and be like, Carolyn, what are you talking about? Okay. Do people have a sense of which of these directions you want to go? You can drop an A or B in the chat for me, and we'll see where we're going. Oh, wait. All right, split decision so far. Thank you, Free, for breaking the tie. All right, so we're gonna.
No, I knew it was going to be me.
We'll share the slides for all of it, so you'll get the other part also. And we're going to do a 201 series in the fall, and open book management and financial statement storytelling might be a thing that we do in more depth there. So we'll get to it. Yeah, for sure. Happy to. Okay, so now we will go very fast through the slides that we're not doing. Sorry. A little preview. So many fun things, so many pictures. Okay. Co-op management. So we talked briefly about structures for co-op management. What work is management actually doing? Democracy Org Institute has this really nice little framework where they say co-op is like a house, and the 4 cornerstones of the house, or 4 pillars of the house, are information, money, people, and power. And so the job of management is to make sure that the co-op is sharing all of those things. So it's, creating equitable systems for sharing information. By people, we mean sort of human development, power, and money. And in their scenario, they say that the foundation is the vision and mission and values of the co-op. The wiring is the trust among members, and then the current is participation. I like it. I can buy it. So let's break down each of those pillars. So when we talk about information, we're really talking about sort of creating systems for recording information, having practices to share information and make meaning of it. I'm just going to click through all of these. Asking questions like, what's the co-op strategy for meeting member needs over the short and long term? And what metrics do we need to track to know that we're doing that? How can we translate financial information into like actionable knowledge information? So a lot of, information, a lot of it is financial, and also metrics based, and also what's going on within the co-op. So making sure there are systems, for instance, for the board to communicate to members on a regular basis, or people to understand what the big picture plan of the co-op is and stuff. Even though management's not making those decisions, the board's making those decisions, management really is responsible for being the conduit and kind of bringing everybody along. Human development. Part of this is what we would normally think of as HR. I'm sorry, I could have done these slides better. Part of it's what we often think of as HR, which I find sometimes in conventional businesses actually is not very people development oriented, but in a co-op, we really want it to be. So it's about how are we developing members' capacity to participate democratically, both in how they do their jobs, but also in being able to take part in governance, being able to communicate, bring proposals, provide feedback, getting ongoing education, both about what they do in their day-to-day work, but also about the co-op. The other piece of human development, I think, is how the co-ops actually connect in coalitions and alliances to help members meet their needs at a level beyond what's happening in the co-op. So, like, in my experience at a yard and a half, we had a lot of members for whom childcare, navigating healthcare, immigration stuff, even housing instability got in the way of like being able to come to work and do our best work and do our best leadership within the co-op. And so we were part of different coalitions that helped members meet those needs together, in addition to meeting the need for dignified, safe work that we got through actual participation in the co-op. And just, I have training on here, and when we talk about the co-op principles, ongoing education and training is really at the heart of that. And I can't underscore it enough, because I think it's really easy when we get into the day-to-day of doing the work. It's really easy to forget and think like, oh, we all work here, we all know what's going on. And in fact, it's so important to help people both develop professionally, but also especially to develop as leaders within the co-op, and to invite new folks into the co-op. So when you have new employees, having them feel like, okay, I understand how I can become a member and what that means and why ownership benefits me and what responsibilities that involves. Yeah, I just like want to underscore, I feel like one of the earliest jobs in a co-op is figuring out how do people get in and how do people understand what their rights and responsibilities are as members, and also how do they get out. But that training piece is really critical. The next pillar is power, and I want to distinguish between power that members exercise at the governance level, so by being able to elect the board or being able to serve on the board, and then day-to-day power within the workplace through sort of more democratic management. So sharing power doesn't have to mean everybody takes part in every decision. That would be, pretty inefficient. But how we make decisions together and who makes which decisions is really important for everybody to know and be able to participate in, so that that's clear and feels fair. And also that circle of delegation that I talked about before, having it be clear what can I as a member do? What am I holding the board accountable for? What's their job? What are they holding management accountable for? What's their job? So having all of that stuff clear is really critical. And then last pillar is sharing money, which really means, in a co-op, it's usually sharing money means sharing surplus. So, as members, we get to participate in the financial success of the co-op. And the way that we do that is if the co-op makes a profit, has surplus, then that gets returned back to the worker owners as a dividend. So, through patronage. Or if you're a consumer co-op, it might be a dividend or a percentage based on how much you bought from the co-op. So, making sure that members understand what the mechanism is for that, and also that they can see how the co-op's doing financially so that they can, improve the financial performance and increase what they stand to gain. And, at the end of the day, co-ops aren't, they're not a get rich quick opportunity, right? I mean, it's really about sustaining, we came together to be a co-op to do something good for ourselves and for our community. And ultimately the goal is to make sure that that's sustainable. So, one of the big things about the money pillar is making sure that we have good financial operational management so we can keep doing good stuff. The sort of no margin, no mission issue. The co-op actually has to succeed financially to do all the good stuff it was created to do. So a little closing, and actually that went really fast. So we could go back and do some pictures if people want to. But let me stop there and see if people have questions on the 4 pillars first. Okay. All right. We'll see. We'll see how this goes. We'll see how far we get. Okay. So, communicating about money with pictures or financial statement storytelling. So financial statement storytelling is basically a way of engaging people in finances, because a lot of us, we look at financial statements and we go, I mean, I go, yay, that's so exciting. But most of us, it can be a little overwhelming or boring or whatever. So using storytelling and pictures to get people engaged with finances is a really good way to exercise those pillars of sharing information and money and power. We do this by focusing on a few key numbers, following those numbers at regular intervals, and encouraging employees or members to ask questions about what they're seeing. So, do we see trends? Did something change? What happened there? Asking those questions and building a narrative together around it. So, okay, we saw this change here. Why did that happen? What are we going to do differently next time, etc. So, when we're talking about a narrative, here's an example of what that might look like. It's really about putting numbers into context. So, if I said in our co-op, monthly sales were $20,000, is that good? Is that bad? We don't really know. It's like, that's a number. Okay. Are we over budget? Are we under budget? So we can compare it to where we thought we would be. Okay. Our budget was 30,000. We made 20,000. Okay. Now we can say, we're under budget. That's some meaningful information. What happened? Why did that happen? So we can, have some conversation with people. And where are we going based on that? So, okay, next month, are we going to try and hit 25? We're going to try and split the difference between those. Do we feel like that's doable once we've analyzed why we were under budget this month? So you see how that can kind of get people involved, take them beyond the here's how we did this month, and actually see how their work might connect to that and what they could do about that. So this, this financial statement storytelling is really just telling a story that has a beginning, middle, and end, and helping people see where they fit within that. And we use this because it can increase member engagement, especially when it's part of a more robust open book management strategy where people really see how their particular work connects to the bottom line. It can improve business performance because now we're not just doing our work in a vacuum, we're doing our work and seeing what the financial results are, and we can can track other metrics too, but seeing what the results are and then checking and adjusting as we go. And then, like I said before, no margin, no mission, we can, by improving financial results, also improve the sustainability of the co-op or the ability for it to meet its goals. So one tool that we use for this is called the 6-line P&L or 6-line profit and loss statement. Does anybody have an idea why we might pick that as a place to start? If we're just going to look at one piece of financial information, why might we pick the profit and loss statement? This is not
maybe it relates to the market study and whether it's feasible.
Okay.
I think it's a good beginning to any story. Like, what do we think we were going to do? And what are we actually doing?
Mm-hmm.
How is it going? And then launch from there into why.
Right. Yeah, because it kind of captures, okay, in this period, how did we think we were going to do? How are we going to do? How did we actually do? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, to Free's point, it's the first indicator of business health. So when we talk about feasibility, when we're doing that sort of back of the napkin math, it's like, can we sell enough to cover the cost of providing our good or service? There are other things that are also important financial indicators. I mean, you can be making money each month and still not be able to make payroll because you have cash flow problems or whatever. But yeah, when we're talking about feasibility, the first thing we're talking about is, can we earn enough to cover our costs? And then to David's point, it's directly tied to operations. So you can really look at, we sold this much, we used this much materials, we spent this much on rent, and what adjustments can we make in the things we can see in our day-to-day work lives to make next month be different? And it covers a period of time. So we can always have that comparison to either our budget for the time period, or how did we do last year at this time, or how did we do last month? So it builds in that like comparison aspect. So that's why we start with a P&L. Why 6 lines? Again, anybody want to jump in on this? From your own business experience? Okay, so when A Yard and a Half first became a co-op and I became responsible for getting people engaged with the finances, I was like, we're a co-op, I'm going to be super transparent. And I shared the whole 7-page long profit and loss statement. This is a multi-million-dollar company. It was like a lot of big numbers. And when I did that, the first thing the board did was they were like, ooh, we were $30 over on postage. And they beat up the office manager for being $30 over on postage. They didn't ask, why are our sales down by $100,000 for the month, So when you have a lot of numbers, it can be very hard to learn to kind of prioritize what's important and not lose the forest for the trees. So we just use 6 lines, and it helps people see the big picture without getting bogged down in the details. So, it's just revenue, how much did we sell, direct labor, how much did it cost to provide the labor to make the thing or provide our good or service, other cost of goods sold, so things that are directly related to the cost of producing the product, so like materials or subcontractors. That leaves you with gross profit. This is what happens when you subtract out your direct costs from your revenue. And then overhead costs, overhead expenses, which is all of the sort of fixed costs that go into running the business, like, rent, insurance, that type of stuff. And then net profit, what you're left with at the end, that's actually your surplus. So when we talk about 6-line P&L, that's what we're looking at. And this is just an example of how you could use this to sort of teach how your co-op makes money and how to increase profitability. So when I worked for a yard and a half, before we were a co-op, our boss was really good at doing open book management with us. And I think that's one of the reasons, not that becoming a co-op was easy, but to the extent it was easy, it was because she really invested in teaching us this stuff. So before we were a co-op, she set a goal that if we could achieve 10% profit, she would do profit sharing with everybody in the company. So each month she shared with us cost of goods sold and labor costs, shared it with all the staff. We would have discussions, the crews would talk about how can we save on materials, how can we save on delivery charges, can we reduce overtime, project managers thought about how can we sell more, how can we do upsells, can we reduce non-billable time, and we were able to increase our sales while keeping the labor costs stable and reducing our cost of goods sold. So that translated into a 4% higher gross margin. And the cool thing about the reason why we focus on gross margin is because overhead, it's fixed costs, right? It basically stays stable. So if you can increase your gross margin, any profit there is going to fall right to your bottom line. So that translated to us hitting that 10% goal and being able to do profit sharing. So, this is sort of a simple example of how by sharing the numbers, following them regularly, and engaging people in conversation, you can improve. And I always feel a little apologetic about talking about profit and money, even though we know that we need profit to grow our co-op and be able to provide more benefit for our members. But you can apply the same principle to any metric that you want to measure. So it could be, customer service ratings. It could be on-the-job accidents. Anything that you feel like is an important metric that you want to measure to improve the quality of life in your co-op, pick it, measure it, engage people in regular conversation, benchmark yourselves, and figure out how to do better. And it can be really empowering and a great way to create improvements, whether in the bottom line or in other things that you identify as important. It's really just sort of about creating more of a culture of accountability and shared, shared responsibility for decision making. That last example also, I didn't really get into it, but if you look at the two stacked bar charts on the side, you can see visually the difference in we reduced cost of goods sold by 4%, and that translated to a 4% higher profit. Well, 6% because math. But, you can visually look at that and see reducing cost of goods sold equals increased profit. So this is why, tying storytelling to also using graphics can make your financial statement storytelling a lot more impactful. And if you think about, we actually do this all day, every day. And if you're working with a group of members who might feel a little like, numbers, I don't really know. You can think about when you go into a store and you look at what's on sale. You see something's on sale for 40% off, you do the math in your head about, oh, is that a good deal or not? If you look at this weather chart, you can look at this and say, if I'm going to plan a vacation in August, would I rather be in Boston or Atlanta? If I'm going on vacation in January, where would I rather be? So we're making sense of pictures about numbers all the time. And people can do that just as easily looking at a chart of what's our revenue versus budget. So minimal numbers, use some charts and graphs, include a little story. And you can use different types of pictures to tell different types of stories. So this is a line graph. It shows, okay, labor cost as percentage of income. So if we just were to look at labor cost, that might not tell us anything, because if we spent $10,000 on labor to do $100,000 of work, that's way more impactful than spending $10,000 on labor to do $20,000 worth of work. So we look at percent of income because it lets us see how impactful is our labor proportional to how much we're selling. So you can see for this co-op, they set a goal that they're going to keep their labor cost at, what is that, 45% of income, where the dotted line is. And they're looking at, okay, let's compare last year, which is the gray line, to the light blue line this current year. So you can use line graphs to show you trend over time. And a question that somebody might have looking at this is, hey, like, what happened in May? Why did our labor versus income jump so much compared to last year? So you can see there how by using the percentage versus just the straight dollar amount, you can prompt a really good question about what's happening with our efficiency here. Next is pie charts. So pie charts help us see parts in proportion to a whole. And you can use them to invite questions about one slice compared to another. So, if you're looking at this, even if there were no dollar amounts attached to it, you'd look at that and be like, ooh, net profit's really little. And I know that that's the part that's going to lead to being able to do profit sharing. So what do we need to do to make that slice bigger? And again, if you just knew that net profit was $20,000, you'd say, is that a lot or a little? I mean, yeah, you'd probably do the math of, okay, we've got 10 members, so that's $2,000 per person. But in terms of how are we doing as a business, you don't really know if that's a good number or a bad number unless you're seeing it in the context of, but how much should we earn overall? What was our total revenue? And how much did we spend on other stuff that could have gone to profit? And then bar graphs. These are good for showing a comparison of two or more series over time. So like looking at this year versus a few previous years, or looking at the performance of several different business lines over from quarter to quarter. And you can use these to invite questions about trends over time. So you could look at this and be like, oh, this year is really similar. It's actually exactly the same as 2022. So could we look back at 2022 and see what we might expect for December? So yeah, that's what I got. And if you want to dig more into this, a couple of resources. Democracy at Work Institute, that has that 4 pillars model, has an entire democratic management manual that's available online. And they also have some good free self-paced video courses on everything from how to have good conversations to they have a module on financial statement storytelling. So there's a lot of good resources there that you'll get when we share the deck out with you. And then The Great Game of Business is kind of like it's kind of the Bible of open book management. I will say I don't love the tone of it for co-ops because it's very much like, it's written by a guy who had a company and wanted to figure out how to maximize profit. And he was like, I'll maximize profit by sharing a little bit of it with you guys. And so there are tone things that I don't love, but we still lean on it pretty heavily for how to actually implement open book management in terms of how do you teach people, what kind of games can you design, how can you really get people engaged. But there's like a little coercive smarmy tone that I don't love. But whatever, it's still good information. And just by way of wrap up, here's some links to our website, our playlist, and our YouTube. There's a lot of recorded seminars and information like this. We put out a monthly newsletter, the Co-op Monthly. That's a good place to get information about upcoming trainings from throughout the co-op ecosystem, opportunities to connect with co-op community, either in person or virtually, in the Northeast, and also upcoming like grant opportunities and stuff like that. So if you're not already signed up for that, do so. The co-op tools that are linked are stuff that we're referring to throughout this course. So those can be good resources for designing your co-op and sort of putting those foundational pieces into place. And then, again, reiterating Johan's invitation, attend an office hour on Wednesdays, schedule a one-on-one coaching call if that's helpful, reach out to us. And yeah, love to hear questions, reflections. We've got a little bit of time, so even if there's anything you've just been noodling on privately, I see some stuff in the chat. Yeah, Free, thank you for joining us. From my perspective, what is it like leaving a worker-owned co-op in terms of business continuity? Like for me, having left, they're still clicking along, they're rocking it. The thing that's really interesting about conversions and about co-ops in general is that you're never done. Like succession planning has to always be on your mind. And I mean, we even say when you start your co-op, you should be thinking about succession. You should be thinking about, as a founder, who's going to carry it on, who's going to provide the energy and the ideas moving forward so that you don't burn out and take the co-op with you. So succession needs to be something that's always on the table for discussion. And in a conversion, Giovanni and I, as the first generation new leadership, knew we weren't going to be there for, I mean, he is still there, bless his heart. But he's starting to think now, okay, like we're both 50. What's that next crop of leaders going to look like coming in? Do they want to continue to have one CEO? Are they going to have a different leadership structure? And who in the co-op is that going to be? So I think, business continuity certainly can happen, should happen, but it takes planning. Interested in applying this knowledge set to real estate co-ops. They have the same core values as business enterprise, but the goals are a bit different. Do we have experience with real estate co-ops? Probably Johan more than anybody. I don't think that we have, is that true? We have maybe one in our portfolio. There are a couple of models in the Northeast. There are a couple more nationally. And yeah, so I guess I'd open it up, like Johan, Carla, if you guys have anything you want to say about real estate co-ops.
Yeah, I mean, I would invite Zach to kind of share more, in the context of managing your co-op. You're going to have to manage that community of people and property management. So, those are two extremely active domains of management in the real estate co-op. But what's your question?
Nothing in particular. I just wanted to, it's helpful to understand the sort of like dynamics, if you will, just operating a co-op as it were, and just applying those principles back to the sort of real estate environment. But it's very interesting. You said you might have one in your portfolio. It might be, worthwhile to have an offline conversation just to kind of, I've been trying to work with folks who are applying the co-op model to like increase affordability. So like I said in the chat, the math is a little bit different than a business enterprise co-op because you're trying to like cost minimize for the sake of affordability, and that's sort of like your overarching principles in managing the co-op. So, I definitely learned a lot of language here today, and I'd be interested to talk more at some point. Specifically about the case study that you may have, and it's definitely potentially a forward-thinking model for affordability and that sort of thing. And it'd be very interesting to learn more from your team.
Yeah, and I mean, what we do have is a lot of housing co-ops, and there's a certain amount that is, I think, transferable across because I think what we see with housing co-ops is that, um, like you said, it's not a direct translation because usually in a housing co-op you don't have anybody who's professionally in management. Whereas in a worker co-op, often you do. You have people who like that's their job, that's what they're hired for. And so any co-op that has a real estate component, you're thinking about how do you manage that asset over time to make sure the value of the asset remains strong, that you're, planning for long-term capital improvements and repairs and maintenance and all that kind of stuff. And so which you're doing that in a cooperative business also. But in a real estate co-op, that is your primary asset and your primary reason for existing is making sure that that asset continues to bring value to the people who are, residing in it or doing business in it or whatever. And so I think being very explicit about what's the skill set that you need, what's the accountability to members if the members aren't themselves doing that work. If you're hiring an outside management company, how does that fit into your cost structure? Because yeah, you're right that at the end of the day, you're trying to minimize cost for everybody, but also maximize value. So like we don't want to be minimizing cost at the expense of the longevity of the asset or our safety or comfort as the tenants. It's a balance of can we tolerate a little bit of a rent increase to make sure that we can upgrade the HVAC system when we need to without having to have a big assessment. So there is some stuff that's similar, even though your goal is operating at cost while maximizing value rather than maximizing returns for the members. Other thoughts? And Zachary, happy to like figure out who's the best person on our team to talk with. Probably on the loan officer side more because they're the ones who are working more intimately with those individual co-ops.
Absolutely. And the way you said it was perfect. It's you're quite literally living in the co-op, whereas everything else is so you have like all your, property management needs, while like you said, the math is just a little bit different, and it'd be interesting. I've just been trying to learn more from other people's experiences and seeing sort of the benefits and the difficulties of operating a real estate co-op in the long run. It's definitely a great vehicle to be able to, implement all the things that you had mentioned, but in practice, it just takes a different tone a little bit than maybe a traditional business enterprise co-op.
Any other questions folks have?
question for y'all. Thinking about sort of management structures and differentiating between management and governance. Do people have any like either gut reactions or things that you're thinking about in your own co-op about how to structure management or how to structure decision making? Like there was the beginning of an interesting conversation in our small group about how do we balance wanting to be innovative and kind of move fast with wanting to make sure that everybody's meaningfully able to participate.
I can jump in. Um, I'm a big believer in the idea that anything that is going to be like anything that's going to be like a bold decision that is bold is just another word for risky and unpopular. You'd have to do that within a small group of people. However, good decisions have to authentically emanate from the collective culture. Um, so I also don't think that you should have sort of a leadership team that has the institutional ability to just make random decisions that are out of compliance with what the broader collective wants to do. And so I think that there's value in having guardrails or tenets set by the large group of people. Like we don't call it outside these lines because it's just not, this is kind of what we do and how we do it. But then within that realm, leadership, a smaller group of people makes those decisions with very clear accountability down to the specific person, so that we can be honest about why something didn't work and pivot accordingly. I'd be curious what other people think.
Yeah, something that we see more in the co-op grocery sector than necessarily in worker co-ops is policy governance, which is precisely that thing of saying like, we're going to delegate, we the board are going to delegate a heck of a lot of autonomy to the GM and hold them accountable for results. But we're going to create a set of policies that say you must and you may not. And that's the boundaries within which they have to play. So there might be things about, wages and benefits or community accountability or whatever, but then they have very broad discretion to come up, to innovate within those parameters. And then the flip side is that sometimes you get into situations where either the board or the community, like the stakeholders, feel like, oh, that decision, it may have technically been within the bounds of what we could foresee when we set out the policy, but actually it didn't feel aligned with, the community's needs, or it had some unintended consequences or impacts. And so, like, there's another accountability conversation that happens around that when it's a little too unmoored from getting stakeholder input, at the right place in the process.
I was curious too, is there anyone here who has any co-ops in mind that do lean towards like bold decisions or innovation that are successful? Just curious if anyone had any in mind.
Think, we'd love to hear what people think, but it depends on the sector and the type of co-op, I would say worker co-ops might lend themselves more to that because you have a tight tour group, the relationship of the members to the co-op are, I come every day, I earn my livelihood, I have an expertise, right? Maybe we're all designers, maybe we're all landscapers. And so I feel a little bit more off the bat empowered to engage in decision making. When you have a food co-op, you may have 1,500 people. none of them who've ever managed a grocery store. And so their connection to the operations weaker, right? They want to get the food they need. And in a housing co-op, it's intimate. You might have 5 people, or you might have an entire compound, but we're still like a consumer co-op purchasing something that we really don't have any expertise in delivering. So that's the first level. And then you get into the industry stuff, right? So it depends on what you mean by bold, right? Equal exchange is a worker co-op, and they were bold with their investment mechanism, right? So it really just depends on the area. And yeah, keep going. Well, what were you thinking just now?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, for my co-op, it's design and technology. And being in technology, you kind of have to, like, I would like to have a culture. You'd like to have a culture within a technology firm to tend to be more innovative. Um, but yeah, to your point, I think being like worker co-op and, member centric, if those people gear towards that, um, it will probably reflect in the way that we operate and make decisions as well. So yeah, that makes sense.
Are you familiar with platform co-ops?
A little bit, yes, but not too much.
Yeah, there's a book. Well, I can find it later, but that's a whole movement in tech, which is my background. And you
Mhm.
can it's basically uh the theory of change that you're setting out to build when you build your company um, should ideally be held by all. So there's already some innovation baked into your mission of what you do. And then from there, you're really kind of building a strategy or a roadmap, and that can be done in a way that is a bit more sort of cooperatively oriented. So you're still probably going to have a leadership structure that decides exactly what your roadmap looks like. Um, but at that point, you're not saying, hey, we have forever been a fishing cooperative and now we're also going to raise sheep, right? Like you're sort of like within the realm of like what you set out to do. And so in that context, innovation within what you already said you're going to do is limited to a more strategic thing that I think lends itself a little bit better to cooperative decision making at some level.
It makes sense.
Yeah, really nice questions. Any closing ones? We probably can squeeze one more in if there is. Otherwise, you can have your 6 minutes, of course.
I have one that's not related to management at all, and I'm not sure if anyone here can answer it. Um, but yeah, I had reached out to Johan about this too, but just curious if anyone here has any thoughts. So it's literally just about naming. So we are looking to call our cooperative Triber Cooperative. So Tribe and Cyber Cooperative, but in New York, I know you can't like use the word cooperative in your name unless you're like legally formed as one. Um, and so we're an agency and we're looking to be um, more of a freelancer cooperative. So still structured as an LLC, which I'm not sure if that's our final decision, but it's kind of what we're thinking about right now. But we were just trying to see if it's possible to like have a legal name that is like, doesn't have the word cooperative, but use the word cooperative like in our branding names. I'm not sure if anyone here can answer that question, but yeah.
I'll try to do something about it. Here, because I'm also in New York City, I've seen a lot of people use the word collective.
Okay.
That's a way to navigate around that, maybe to keep that idea of keeping still the cooperative things in
Mhm.
it and still, be guided through. My yoga studio is a collective, it's a
Mhm.
cooperative. Um, and that's, I mean, the bad part about it is that it's not super branding. Like immediately, you're not going to be thinking about a co-op, but at
Mhm.
least you're still going to be thinking about the governance, maybe being part of a group. So I'm not sure if
Mhm.
your branding still is within that, but try to find words that are within that direction.
You
Okay.
familiar with start.coop?
What about them?
It's not a co-op. It's a nonprofit.
It is a nonprofit. Yep.
So I imagine you should be able to use the word co-op in your branding. I mean, that's an example of it being done in the wild without being formally structured as a co-op.
You can't. It's it depends on what state you're in. Most state cooperative statutes specifically say that you cannot use the word cooperative in your name. Start.coop maybe they're a Delaware corp. I mean, maybe they're incorporated someplace, not in Massachusetts where they're located. Or they may get around it because it's not technically their name. I'd have to look at their filing.
It's
But
not.
yeah. I mean, my questions would be more along the lines of really interrogating what are the reasons you don't want to be incorporated as a co-op. There could be good reasons, but there might not be. I think a lot of people make assumptions that LLCs are like more flexible. So I'd interrogate that, and then also I'd talk with a lawyer, a New York lawyer, about whether you can do a DBA. So doing business as tribe or cooperative, but where your legal registered name is different, and whether that would be kosher under the statute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I shared a few of those, and I think, David points made me think of the difference between your domain versus your legal name, right? So .coop is a kind of a global company that has been trying to push the co-op identity using that domain. So it isn't really accounted for, right? As far as just the fact that it's a domain. So that could be another way to support your branding, right? Go to .coop and get their domain. You can get it for free as a emerging co-op. At least you used to be able to. I'm sure it's still the case. And that could be a way to incorporate into your branding. Obviously, the word cooperative is a English word, you know what I mean? And then there's the actual legal status, right? So there's kind of, if you're looking for gray area, talk to your lawyer, but the domain is definitely, a gray area for sure, because lots of nonprofits use it. And it's an opportunity to identify with the cooperative movement, without having that legal status change.
But it is subject, like to get the domain, it is subject to some tests. So, they'll want to poke at you and make sure that you fit that, what they consider operating on a cooperative basis.
Okay.
Because like Start.coop's, I think they're a nonprofit, technically.
Okay.
Just like us, we have a .coop domain as well.
Yep, it is true.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, I don't know if we're like gonna officially just do an LLC or go with the full cooperative corporation, but yeah, I think from what I've seen around freelancer cooperatives, like a lot of them still kind of use the LLC, but yeah, I gotta learn more and actually talk with a lawyer. So
We'll follow up in that, Kale.
sounds good. Thank you.
Think we're good?
I think we're good. Thank you all for hanging out with us.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah. Our next session is going to be June 24th. Until then, we'll have weekly optional office hours, and you can always reach out to us over email for deeper questions. All right.